Oh, hello, Battletech fans. I know it's been a while since my last retrospective, but in a hilarious turn of events... You know, I better not. We're recording tonight. I think I should leave that line out. No, there's no time to talk about the waters of Mars. I say we talk about what we came here to talk about, and that's Battletech. But to do that, first we're gonna have to turn back the hands of time to see things from a whole new angle. Now, here's a phrase I know we haven't heard in a long time, but it's about to take on some new meaning. Please be kind. Rewind. A quick correction from the first video. As noted by commenter Steven Strangeways, the classic wireframe look for the armor diagram was based not on the chameleon, as I previously had thought, but instead based on unused concept art for a chassis named the Viper. This fact was also noted by Bishop Steiner as well. Okay, now we're good. You see, the 90s were a time of exploration. A maturing Gen X was finally carving out their mark on the world, and everything was changing. See, Gen X? I didn't forget you. Despite Battletech only being just past the halfway point to its 10th birthday, it was well ahead of its time insofar as brand growth. Just think of it like the Doogie Howser of the tabletop game world at the time.
So, wanna play Monopoly?
Battletech was starting to show up in more and more game shops, and with that kind of popularity, major changes were instituted to the record sheet, both aesthetically and structurally.
The whole album has a clear, crisp sound, and a new sheen of consummate professionalism that really gives the songs a big boost.
But here's the thing you gotta understand. Battletech was really just starting to come into its own here. And here, what we're seeing is the beginning of the game's rebellious teenage years. The weird patterns from the previous iteration remained, and weapon information was still, sadly, not included. With these, players would either have to possess a large amount of ancillary knowledge, or else they'd find themselves beholden to the rulebook to find information on things, like the difference between Inner Sphere and Clan lasers, for example. Certain types of autocannons were also not noted as such, and even pieces of similar equipment varied in how it was labeled on the sheet. Would you like a jelly, baby? Over the course of about a year, 5 record sheet books would see print in this format. Each book would only cover the mechs of a specific weight class, so if you wanted access to every weight class, you had to buy them all. But here's the really fun part. The record sheets weren't organized by tonnage. This is why I call it the teenage years. It was all over the place, trying so hard to stand out and be seen that certain things got thrown to the wayside in favor of flair.
We need to talk about your flair.
Really? I have 15 pieces on.
No? Not 90s enough?
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
These really were expert-level sheets, and speak very much to the level of dedication the players who used them had. I remember very clearly as a teenager having the rulebook out and ready during a game, just to look up weapon ranges I hadn't yet memorized. To use these sheets, you had to really want to play Battletech. But the positive I'm going to take away from this is that nearly 20-odd years later, I look back at these sheets as the thing that got me to start memorizing things like weapon tables, heat charts, that kind of thing, and it gives me an edge now that I have that other people don't if they haven't studied the same things. I know most weapon information now just right off the top of my head as a result of having to constantly study them, and this allows me to do things like calculate what my opponent's heat penalties may be, knowing ranges for my positioning. The list goes on and on. Despite as much hell as everyone gives the cartoon, information is ammunition is absolutely correct.
It's like the Major always says.
Information is ammunition.
Let's fast forward the tape a few more years. The year is 1994, and Battletech is about to reinvent itself again. This time, I think it's old enough for a few tattoos. Don't you? Basic weapon ranges are now provided for all weapons, showing the maximum range in hexes for each before you go into the subsequently higher range bracket. Some players understood this intrinsically, others experienced some difficulty. Another feature was curly brackets connecting weapons and equipment that took up multiple critical slots. One critical hit would destroy the entire thing. And that was rules as written at the time. However, the curly brackets existed as a way to help players remember that rule. They also served to break up weapons and equipment that took up multiple critical slots. That way players knew where one piece of equipment stopped and another piece of equipment began. Like heat sinks.
We'll be right back.
Battletech.
Okay, here's a challenge. You're in the cockpit of a mall. You're surrounded by hunchbacks. What do you do? Hit 'em where?
Take your best shot. Battletech. Each Battletech Maximum separately within you.
At this point in its life, Battletech had already gone buck wild mercenary man, and it was looking to settle down. So gone were the crazy patterns, the curly brackets, the big header at the top. This iteration was definitely going for that more professional, button-down look. The armor and internal structure diagram hasn't really changed, but all the little bits of flair are totally gone. Record sheet books were now organized and sold by era rather than weight class, and everything from cover to cover was also sorted by tonnage. To account for the new Level 3 rules presented in 1997's Maximum Tech release, a special Level 3 record sheet was presented for anyone who fancied trying their hand at tweaking the design process until it squealed. All sorts of various items were added to accommodate these rules, and outside of this supplement, do not exist anymore. Now you can still use them if that's your thing, but there's probably a lot of information on there that most folks just aren't gonna need. 1998 was a quick and interesting throwback when it was time to chaperone the alumni prom, trying to stay looking hip to the kids when you're standing next to all the other old fogies. With the Battletech Master Rules being the standard up into the early 2000s, I don't recall seeing any other iterations from the 90s beyond this. I also don't recall any supplements being released around that time that changed anything up either. What I do remember, though, is that for the rest of the decade, these really were the gold standard that almost everyone wanted to use or was using if they weren't doing theirs by hand or with one of the many bootleg design programs of the mid-90s. Say, any other old hands remember the drawing board? Alright, Battletech fans, I sure hope you've enjoyed this little trip with us through the 90s, and if you'll subscribe and turn on all notifications, you'll find out exactly when we're gonna start peeling through the sheets of the 2000s. They grow a soul patch, folks. It's wild. Now, of course, if I've missed anything, feel free to blast me in the comments.
Did someone say blast?
Be sure to smash our like button and subscribe to our channel.
Crowdfunding is when lots of people give you small amounts of money to help your passion project come to life.